There's a number that quietly changes how money feels. $500,000. It doesn't make you rich, but you're not poor anymore either. You're standing in a financial gray zone that most people never reach and almost nobody understands. You still worry. You still work. But the math underneath your life starts behaving differently. At this level, money stops feeling like something you're constantly chasing and starts feeling like something you're responsible for managing. This is where many people get confused. They think $500,000 means freedom. It doesn't. Others think it's still meaningless. That's wrong too, because right here, this exact milestone, the rules begin to shift. Risk feels different. Time feels different. Even your job starts to look different. And here's the part nobody warns you about. The first thing that changes isn't your lifestyle. It's your perspective. Stay with me, because what changes next can either accelerate your future or quietly destroy it. $500,000 changes how loss feels. When your portfolio is small, you think in dollars. A $1,000 drop feels personal. A $5,000 gain feels like progress. That mindset makes sense when every dollar still matters for survival. But at $500,000, that way of thinking quietly becomes dangerous. Because now, the numbers are bigger. A normal market swing can move your account by $20,000, $30,000, even $50,000. And if you keep thinking in raw dollars, your brain panics. Here's the truth most people aren't prepared for. Those swings aren't a crisis. They're percentages doing what percentages have always done. A 10% move doesn't mean something broke. It means the market is breathing. Wealthy investors don't ignore losses, but they frame them differently. They ask, what changed structurally? Not, how much money did I lose today? This mental shift from absolute dollars to relative percentages is non-negotiable at this level. Without it, every headline feels like an emergency. Every dip feels like a threat. And that's exactly how people sabotage years of progress, by reacting emotionally to perfectly normal noise. Because the volatility itself isn't the danger, your response to it is. This is where most people panic. When you hear $50,000 loss, your stomach tightens. That number feels catastrophic. It's a year of work for many people, gone in days. But context changes everything. At $500,000, that $50,000 isn't a financial collapse, it's 10%. And 10% swings are not rare, they're normal. The market has always moved this way. What's different now is the scale and your emotional response to it. This is the point where people confuse volatility with danger. They see red numbers and assume something must be wrong. So they act, they sell, they retreat to cash, they tell themselves they'll get back in later. And that's how they fail. Not because the math stopped working, but because they couldn't sit still while it worked. Historically, markets recover. Emotionally, people don't. Reaching $500,000 means you've already proven you can invest consistently, but surviving past it requires something harder, emotional discipline. Volatility becomes a test of patience, not intelligence. A test of restraint, not prediction. And to pass it, you have to stop behaving like a saver and start thinking like something else entirely. Hoarding money no longer works. Early on, saving is the game. You accumulate, you protect, you celebrate every new dollar added. That mindset gets you to your first milestones. But at $500,000, it quietly stops being enough. Because now your biggest risk isn't spending too much. It's mismanaging what you already have. At this level, you're no longer just a saver. You're a capital manager. That means thinking in systems. How much risk am I taking? How is my money allocated? What happens if one piece fails? A single reckless decision here can erase years of progress. Not because you're unlucky, but because the numbers are finally large enough to matter. This is why discipline becomes more valuable than hustle. Why boring rules beat exciting ideas. You don't need to be smarter than the market. You need to be consistent with yourself. The goal shifts from adding more money to not breaking what already works. And here's the uncomfortable paradox. To keep growing, you can't freeze in fear. You can't lock everything down and hide. Because playing it too safe at this stage comes with its own hidden cost. Safety can quietly destroy you. When you don't have much, safety feels smart, cash feels calm, stability feels responsible. But at $500,000, that instinct can backfire. Here's the simple math most people miss. Inflation doesn't need to crash your portfolio to hurt you. It just needs time. If your money earns less than inflation, you're not standing still. You're moving backward, slowly and quietly. And $500,000 is finally large enough for compounding to matter. This is when growth starts pulling its own weight. This is when your money can begin working harder than you do. Pulling everything into cash at this stage feels cautious. But it's like cutting the engine once the plane is already in the air. You don't crash immediately. You just stop climbing. Long-term investors understand this trade-off. They respect risk, but they also respect opportunity. Because the real danger now isn't volatility, it's stagnation. It's choosing comfort over progress, certainty over growth. And right here, this is where compound interest stops being a theory and starts revealing its true power. This is where math turns violent. For years, your progress came from effort, saving, contributing, sacrificing. Every new dollar felt earned, because it was. But around $500,000, something flips. Your investment returns start to rival, then quietly surpass the money you add yourself. This is the moment compounding stops being an abstract idea and starts behaving like a force. Your portfolio begins to grow on its own. Not because you worked harder, but because the base is finally big enough. At this stage, money does more work than you do. It earns while you sleep, while you work, while you're not thinking about it at all. That's why people underestimate this phase. They expect progress to feel dramatic. Instead, it feels subtle, almost boring, until you zoom out. Then you realize your assets are multiplying faster than your effort ever could. The engine is running, the flywheel is spinning, and once compounding has momentum, it becomes fragile. Small interruptions don't just slow growth, they steal future years you'll never get back. Which is why the most valuable thing you can buy now isn't higher returns. The real luxury is optionality. Most people imagine wealth as things: a nicer car, a bigger house, a more impressive lifestyle. But $500,000 doesn't really buy status. It buys space. Space to breathe, space to think, space to choose. At this level, the biggest upgrade isn't what you can afford, it's what you can refuse. You're no longer making every decision under financial pressure. You don't say yes just because you're scared of losing income. You don't cling to bad situations out of desperation. That changes how you show up. You negotiate differently. You tolerate less nonsense. You stop confusing urgency with importance. This is why people with real financial cushion often seem calmer. They're not reckless. They're not lucky. They're simply not trapped. And that freedom doesn't come from spending more. It comes from needing less. $500,000 doesn't mean you can walk away from everything, but it does mean you can walk away from what isn't working. And once you have that option, your relationship with work starts to change in a very quiet way. You don't quit, but you breathe. Hitting $500,000 doesn't mean you walk out tomorrow. You still work, you still earn. But yeah, something critical changes. Your job stops feeling like a hostage situation. Before this point, income controls the conversation. You say yes because you have to. You stay quiet because you're afraid. At $500,000, that fear loosens its grip. You can say no to unreasonable demands. You can push back without panic in your chest. You can consider a different path without risking everything. Maybe that means switching roles. Maybe it means changing industries. Maybe it just means protecting your time. The key is this: your paycheck is no longer your only lifeline. That creates leverage, not loud leverage, but calm leverage. You make better decisions when survival isn't on the line. You choose growth over comfort, alignment over obligation. This is how careers quietly improve, not through dramatic exits, but through thoughtful control. However, this freedom is fragile, because there's a silent enemy that can take it all away without you even noticing it at first. It's not what you earn, it's what you keep. Taxes rarely feel urgent. They don't crash your portfolio overnight. They don't show up as scary headlines. And that's exactly why they're so powerful. At $500,000, taxes become one of the largest forces shaping your future, even if you never think about them. Two investors can earn the same returns, take the same risks, and end up in completely different places, simply because one planned ahead. This is where concepts like timing and tax efficiency start to matter. Not loopholes, not tricks, just using the rules as they were designed. Knowing when to pay taxes and when not to can be worth more than chasing higher returns. Roth accounts, strategic conversions, thoughtful withdrawal planning. None of it is exciting, but all of it compounds quietly in the background. Smart investors don't obsess over beating the market. They focus on keeping more of what the market gives them. Because every dollar saved in taxes is a dollar that stays invested and continues working for years. Do this right, and something interesting happens. The path from 500,000 to 1 million starts to feel shorter than you ever expected. This is the acceleration phase. The hardest part is already behind you. Getting started, staying consistent, pushing the snowball uphill. By the time you reach $500,000, that snowball is heavy. It has momentum. It starts rolling on its own. This is why the journey to 1 million is often shorter than the journey from 0 to 500,000. Your returns grow faster than your contributions. Time begins to do more of the work. But here's the trap. As the finish line feels closer, impatience shows up. People want to speed things up. They chase faster strategies. They reach for risk they don't fully understand. Ironically, this is where discipline matters most. The strategies that got you here, diversification, consistency, patience, are the same ones that carry you forward. Acceleration doesn't require aggression. It requires restraint. Because one reckless decision at this stage can undo years of quiet progress. And that's how people end up back where they started. Not because the plan failed, but because they abandoned it too soon. Boring is what gets you rich. By the time you reach $500,000, you've already done something rare. You showed up. You stayed consistent. Not because you were a genius, but because you followed a process that worked. And that's the part people forget. Wealth at this level isn't built by brilliance. It's protected by discipline. You don't need perfect timing. You don't need secret strategies. You don't need to outsmart anyone. You need to avoid unnecessary mistakes. The temptation now is subtle. You feel confident. You feel close. That's when people tinker. They chase excitement. They abandon boring systems for flashy ideas. And boring quietly loses, only when you stop respecting it. Here's the truth. $500,000 isn't the destination. It's the doorway. A doorway into a different game, where patience compounds faster than effort, and consistency beats intensity every time. If you understand the rules here, if you protect what you've built, you don't just go further, you stay there. $500,000 doesn't change your life overnight. It changes the direction. It's the point where money stops fighting you and starts responding to how you think. This isn't about being rich. It's about playing the right game with patience, discipline, and clarity. Protect what you've built. Let time do its work. Because once you understand this level, the next one isn't a matter of luck. It's a matter of staying the course.